This story took place about 18 years ago. I went to Houston because I found a job at an IT firm. I was 20 years old at the time. I made some friends while I was out there, so we decided to go out one night. While we were out that night, I met a beautiful girl. She was wild. We started talking. We liked each other. We drank. We partied together, and we exchanged contact. Back then, we had landlines, so we talked on the phone about everything. And she would tell me how much she hated living with her father and mother, and how they argued all the time. Her dad, especially. She was 19 years old at the time. We just met and never had access yet, but we were already talking about moving in together and how beautiful our baby would look like. A few weeks later, we went out again, and I noticed she likes to drink a lot and would smoke weed. I was fine with the weed, but then she would start talking about doing hard stuff, which I wasn't cool with, but hey, I wasn't cool with that, but she was hot, and I was in love, and my tolerance for her BS was low. I took her to my place, and we had a steamy night. One time, I dropped her off at her house, and her mom kept cursing at me, saying that I was a bad influence on her daughter, and that she should dump me. Her dad threatened to shoot me the next time he sees me at his house. Come to find out, her mom had been listening to our conversation on the other line all along. Needless to say, I never got along with her parents, but yet we continued to date. We continued to date for 3 more months. Then I broke up with her because of her frequent alcohol and drug usage. I never understood the need for anyone to get completely wasted on alcohol. 1 or 2 drinks? Fine. Smoke some dope? Fine. Why powder? What the F? That was too much for me, so I ended it. She was constantly plastered and uncontrollable. A few weeks later, after we broke up, she called me on the phone and she told me that she was pregnant. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I don't want to be a father yet, but I asked her what she wanted to do. She said she wanted to abort it. That was back in 2003, 2004. So access to clinic were readily available. I asked her if that's what she really wanted. She insisted, and I sent her a $600 money order to help pay for it. I asked her if she wanted me to come along with her, and she said no, that she was going with her friend. The following day, I called her to see how the removal went, and she didn't want to talk about it, and generally didn't want to answer my call. So I kind of said, F it, and we stopped talking. She dropped off from the face of the earth, and we lost contact. A couple of months later, I lost my job because the IT company I was working for went out of business. Since I couldn't easily find another one for months, things were rough. So I decided to move back to Denver with my parents. I got a new phone number, and life kind of went on from there. I found a job and continued to live with my parents. About a year after I moved back to Denver, I was at my job when someone told me that my boss had called me. So I got to his office, and he told me that there was a bounty hunter looking for me outside. I was like, oh shoot. I was scared off my mind. I told him that it must be a mistake because I haven't committed any crimes. So I went outside to see what that was all about. It turns out that my ex-girlfriend's parents sent someone to track me down because they said I got their daughter pregnant. I was confused. I thought I had taken care of this months ago. I gave her money to remove the pregnancy, and that was it. I was thinking that maybe she got pregnant again or something. So the bounty hunter told me that the baby is a few months old, and her mom and dad were taking care of the baby. Additionally, they're looking for me so I could start paying child support for impregnating their daughter. I was given a court order to show up to court at a scheduled date. The incident was so dramatic at my job that it caused them to fire me, thinking that I was some hardcore criminal. They didn't care to hear my story. Now I was out of job and cashless and scared out of my mind. I finally found her number and gave her a call. She told me that her mom was pushing to get hold of me so I could pay child support because I was responsible for the baby. I was shocked. I asked her about the baby removal money I had gave her, and she told me that she never did it. She told me that she went in, took the pill they gave her, and it made her sick, so she left. I was 21, 22 back then, and didn't really know jack about how baby removal works. What we learned in high school involved the scrape or the vacuum cleaner method. So I took her word for it. She had been raising the kid with her mom and dad. I was super stressed. I went home and told my mom the entire story. Right about that time, I lost my job. My dad got laid off, so there was a massive financial uncertainty in my family. On top of that, my ex-girlfriend had called me every day, asking me for money, angry at me that her parents were treating her badly because of her baby. I was super stressed. I went into depression and couldn't eat. My mom was concerned about me, and we put together what we could and sent it to her. So I showed up to court in Texas and found her mom and dad mean-mugging me like I was the fox that came into their barn to steal their chicken. Not surprising who was behind the whole thing. They wanted me to provide child support, and that's when the court gave me a choice to either accept that it was my baby and pay for it or get the test. I thought I knew what I was doing, so I talked to my parents. They told me to get a paternity test. If I was going to pay for it, best to make sure I was the one who should have been responsible. At this point, it had been about a year since that night we got down and dirty, and we broke up a few months after that. I had moved back in with my parents, and I just got fired from my job because of the bounty hunter that came looking for me and was causing a scene. So, before I left for Denver, I went to the clinic to present my state ID and valid photo ID, signed some paperwork, took a seat. They swabbed the inside of my mouth and sent me off. 6 months later, the result came out as inconclusive. I was frustrated because I have been stressfully waiting for the result, only for it to come out as inconclusive. During the waiting period, I was constantly receiving harassing calls from her mom and dad, demanding money to support the baby. I couldn't afford the trip back to Texas again, so they had to send another bounty hunter looking for me to serve me, schedule a court date again. I showed up and took the test, same as before, and a few months later, the result came out again as inconclusive. I would just soon as chalk it up as either operator error or somehow something got contaminated at some stage along the way. The second test, for some reason, took darn near 3 months before anyone heard anything. The result came back inconclusive again. I never got more information than that, so either something happened at the lab, I don't know. By then, it's been almost 2 years now, and I have found a job, so I couldn't be going back and forth on this. I was tired of the stress. Some of you asked why I didn't become the child's father, because I wasn't ready for it at this point in my life. 23-year-old, no job, no prospect, thousands of miles gone, and I never got along with her family. I wanted to just get the result and be done with it. If I was the father, I would pay. So I went and got the test in my state. After I got it done, I got the result back quicker. Less than 2% probability of genetic match. So by the time 2 years since the night of conception rolled around, we finally had the results in. I remember opening the envelope and looking at it over. A lot of it I didn't understand. I did see less than 2% chance of genetic match. I called the number at the top of the form and spoke to a woman, provided the information, and she took me through it. There was absolutely no way I could be the father. Now, I will admit, I was elated at first. I thanked the woman, hung up and looked at my cell. I had to call her, and the reality sets in. I called her. After all the crying and admission, I asked her what really happened that day she went in for removal. On her way to the clinic, she said something inside her clicked, and she wanted to keep it. The roughly $600 I sent, she used it for clothes and stuff for the baby. I asked her why she couldn't just be honest from the start, and who really is the father of the baby. She was crying. She said 2 weeks before we had our night under the sheets that resulted in the baby 9 months later, her father had come home drunk and out of his mind and forced himself on her. I still recall the tone of her voice, asking me if I had really actually taken the test and that if it was real. Well, turns out that her mom was on the other line and she heard our conversation. She reported her dad to the police and they took a DNA test. Who would have guessed? Her dad happened to be the biological father of her kid. And the scumbag has been dragging me to court to pay child support for his baby when he knew darn well that he knocked up his own daughter. In my mind, I was done. I had 2 years of my life interspersed with phone calls, genetic test visits, even bounty hunters showing up at my door and place of work, serving me with notice from her family to show up or else. I don't know. My mom was under the impression that I should have sued for mental anguish and damages, which made no sense at the time because of how miserable she was and the circumstance she finds herself in. I felt horrible for her. I can't even joke about this. Her dad was arrested, and the kid, last I heard, was doing well. It forced her to clean up her act. She had gone in for heavy drugs and alcohol use, and it drove us apart before the child did, and that was 18 years or so ago. We don't talk. Every once in a while, I would think about the kid, but this world ain't a nice place, and with all the stuff she had gone through, I wasn't going to make it worse, so I left it alone. I can't even fathom it, to be honest, and still consider the man to be a scum-sucking trash for putting his daughter through all that. And I can't exactly fault her at all, literally, wanting me to be the father. She was hoping that it was the case because she revived her. In the end, we agreed not to be angry with one another. She was pissed at her father though. I didn't know if that ever went away, though I highly doubt it did. From the little I've heard from mutual friends over 10 years ago, Her dad apparently came out of prison 3 years later, a Bible guy. This all took place in Texas, by the way. Supposedly, he was doing his best to support her and whatnot, but there was some kind of falling apart and she moved out and in with her girlfriend up in Dallas. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. Please support this channel by liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Let's get some reaction on the comment section. Thank you and